They teach you a lot of things in flight school. When you're 24 years old and piloting a multi-million-dollar military helicopter at 10,000 feet, you're trained to anticipate every possible threat. You know how to read the wind, the radar, the enemy's movements. You are trained to survive the battlefield. But there is no manual, no training simulation that prepares you for the enemy waiting for you back home. The enemy that sleeps in your bed. The enemy that shares your blood. My name is Carter. I spent 14 months in a combat zone putting my life on the line every single night, sending every penny of my hazard pay back home to build a future. A hearth. A safe place. I thought I was funding my dream wedding with the man I loved. I didn't know I was actually paying for his secret life with his pregnant mistress. And the worst part? That mistress wasn't just some random woman. She was my younger sister. They thought I was thousands of miles away, blind to their betrayal. They thought they could forge my signature, drain my accounts, and sell my home right out from under me. They were wrong. Because when the truth finally comes home, it doesn't knock gently. It kicks the door down. And I didn't just bring my heartbreak back with me. I brought a military lawyer, a forensic accountant, and a financial hellfire that erased them from my life completely. This is how I destroyed them. To understand how deeply I was betrayed, you have to understand how blind I was. Growing up, my family dynamic was complicated. My sister Chloe was the golden child. I was just the spare part. My parents didn't believe in equal love. They believed in investments. Chloe was their prized asset, the delicate, pretty one who needed constant rescuing. If she failed a class, my mother would march into the school and blame the teacher. If she racked up thousands in credit card debt on designer bags, my father would quietly pay it off, calling it a learning experience. Me, I was the workhorse, the independent one. The danger of being the capable daughter is that your family eventually stops seeing you as a person and starts seeing you as an appliance. You exist only to fix things, pay for things, or stay out of the way. By the time I turned 18, I realized the only way to earn respect, or at least escape the disrespect, was to build my own empire. So I enlisted. I traded my civilian clothes for a uniform and my need for their approval for discipline. I pushed myself through grueling physical training, studied until my eyes bled, and earned my wings. I became an aviation officer. I was making great money. I had a career. And then, during a brief leave in my hometown, I met Mark. Mark was a freelance architect. Or at least he had the business cards for it. He was ridiculously handsome with a $1 million smile and a silver tongue. When you've spent years in a rigid, male-dominated military environment, a guy who brings you sunflowers, listens to you vent, and treats you like a queen feels like an absolute oasis. I was so starved for genuine affection that I completely ignored the red flags. I ignored the fact that he was always in between big contracts. I ignored that I was the one paying for our dinners, our vacations, and eventually his car lease. I justified it. I was the officer. I was the breadwinner. It was my job to provide. A year into dating, he proposed with a modest ring. I cried tears of joy. I wanted that white picket fence life so badly. I wanted a hearth. Shortly after the engagement, I received my deployment orders. 14 months in a high-risk combat zone. Knowing I was leaving, I wanted to secure our future. I took my life savings combined with a VA loan and bought us a house. A stunning 4-bedroom craftsman home in a quiet, affluent suburb. It had a wraparound porch and a beautiful stone fireplace. My sanctuary. The deed was placed solely in my name, something the military bank insisted on. Thank God for that. But since we were engaged, I let Mark move in rent-free. I wanted him to set up our nest while I was deployed. I even opened a joint checking account for house emergencies and maintenance, setting up a direct deposit of $3,000 a month for my military pay. I handed him the keys. I handed him my trust. But the real trap wasn't set by Mark. It was set by my own mother. 2 weeks before I shipped out, my parents invited us over for a farewell dinner. The moment I walked in, I knew I was walking into an ambush. Halfway through dessert, my mother cleared her throat and gave me that sickly sweet smile she only used when she wanted to extract something from me. "Carter, sweetheart," she started. "Chloe has been having a really hard time lately. Her roommates kicked her out, totally unfairly, of course, and she just lost her job at the boutique. She has nowhere to go." I stiffened. "Mom, I'm leaving for a combat zone in 14 days. I can't fix Chloe's life right now." "You don't have to fix it," my father chimed, in his tone instantly aggressive. "You just bought that massive house. It has 4 bedrooms. Mark is going to be all alone in there while you're overseas playing soldier. It makes perfect sense for Chloe to move in. It'll help her get back on her feet, and she can keep Mark company." I looked at Chloe. She was staring down at her plate, playing the tragic victim perfectly. I felt sick. Chloe and I never got along. She was vain, lazy, and always looked at what I had with a lingering, jealous gaze. Mark and Chloe, under the same roof, without me. I looked at Mark, desperately hoping he would defend our boundaries, hoping he would protect our space. Instead, Mark placed his hand over mine, smiled his perfect smile, and looked at my parents. "It's fine, Mr. and Mrs. Davis," Mark said smoothly. "Chloe can stay. It'll be nice to have some family around while Carter is away." "Don't worry, babe," he whispered to me, squeezing my hand. "I'll make sure she stays out of trouble." Suddenly, I was the villain. If I said no, I was the wealthy, heartless military sister leaving my poor sibling homeless on the streets. Surrounded by my parents' guilt trips and my fiancé's supposed generosity, I was cornered. I caved. I agreed to let Chloe move into the guest bedroom rent-free. Before I boarded the transport plane, I had to visit the JAG office, the military lawyers. Standard procedure for deployed soldiers. I drafted a power of attorney, APOA. It allowed Mark to handle minor administrative things, paying the utility bills, dealing with the HOA, or signing for packages. But I explicitly crossed out and initialed the section that allowed the sale, transfer, or refinancing of real estate. I made sure of it. At the airport terminal, they all came to see me off. My mother hugged me. Chloe cried on my shoulder, thanking me for saving her. Mark kissed me passionately and promised he'd have the house looking perfect for our wedding when I returned. I looked at them and felt a surge of pride. I was the provider. I was protecting my family. I flew into a war zone, completely unaware that the deadliest enemies I would ever face were standing right there at Terminal 3, waving goodbye. Fast forward 7 months. Life on a combat deployment is a blur of adrenaline exhaustion and survival. You sleep with your boots nearby. You eat dust for breakfast. The only thing that keeps you sane is the thought of home, the thought of the hearth you built. Mark and I talked twice a week on satellite calls. He was always so sweet, so reassuring. He sent pictures of the front yard he was supposedly landscaping. He told me Chloe was doing great, that she had found a remote job and was finally staying out of trouble. My mother even sent me an email praising how beautifully Mark was maintaining the property. I was exhausted, but I was happy. Everything was going according to plan. Until the 7th month. It was 0300 hours locally. I had just returned from a brutal 12-hour flight mission. I was covered in sweat and hydraulic fluid sitting on my cot in the pitch-dark barracks. I checked my encrypted military phone. It was a fraud alert from my bank. I sat up, frowned, and logged into the banking app. The joint account, the one I set up for house maintenance, the one I had been pumping $3,000 a month into, was almost completely empty. Balance $42.15. I froze. In 7 months, there should have been over $20,000 sitting in that account. I rapidly clicked through the transaction history. My heart started pounding against my ribs harder than it ever did under enemy fire. There were no charges for property taxes or home repairs. Instead, I saw a nightmare. $1,200 at a luxury couple spa resort in Cabo. $3,500 down payment on a brand new Mercedes SUV. $800 at a high-end lingerie boutique, and hundreds of dollars a week at 5-star restaurants. At first, my brain desperately tried to rationalize it. Maybe Mark's identity was stolen. Maybe someone cloned the debit card. I pulled out my phone to call him, regardless of the time difference. But as my thumb hovered over his name, a sickening, primal instinct hit me in the gut. The kind of instinct that keeps you alive in a war zone. Don't alert the target. Instead, I opened a different app. Before I left, I had installed a smart home security system. Not for surveillance, but for safety. There were cameras on the porch, the driveway, and one small, discrete camera integrated into the thermostat in the living room. I had completely forgotten about it. Mark knew about the outdoor ones, but I never mentioned the thermostat camera. Why would I? I trusted him. I opened my laptop and tapped into the live feed. It took a few agonizing seconds to buffer over the satellite connection. The cold, harsh blue light from the monitor washed over my face. The tent around me vanished. The war outside vanished. My entire universe shrank to the screen in front of me. It was early evening back home. The living room was lit by the warm, flickering light of the stone fireplace. The camera angle was wide enough to capture the expensive, custom Italian leather sofa I had bought with my hazard pay. Mark was on that sofa, and straddling him, completely undressed, was my sister Chloe. I stopped breathing. I literally forgot how to draw air into my lungs. My fiancé and my biological sister. In my house. On my furniture. Laughing and kissing like they had been doing it for years. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped the laptop. I hit the record button on the security software. The visual betrayal was enough to break me. But it was the audio that turned my sadness into pure, unadulterated rage. I turned the volume up. The ringing in my ears faded, replaced by their voices. "I want the Cabo trip again," Chloe whined playfully, twirling a lock of his hair. "You promised we'd go back before the grunt gets home." The grunt. That's what my sister called me. Mark laughed, kissing her neck. "We can't go back to Cabo yet, babe. The joint account is almost tapped out. I had to use the last big chunk to pay off your credit card so your dad wouldn't find out." "Well, get more money," she demanded, pouting. "She's an officer, right? Doesn't she have hazard pay? Just transfer it." "I can't access her private accounts, Chloe. Only the joint one." Mark sighed, sitting up slightly. He looked around my beautiful living room. "But I was talking to that sleazy realtor buddy of mine. The market is insane right now. This place has appreciated by at least 80 grand since she bought it." Chloe's eyes lit up. "Can you sell it?" "I have her power of attorney," Mark said smoothly. She crossed out the real estate clause, but honestly, it's pen. I can lose the original draft, a new one, forge her initials, and have my buddy notarize it without her present. We sell the house for 600 grand cash, pocket the money, and vanish before her tour is over. We'd have enough to start over anywhere. "Oh my God, yes," Chloe squealed, kissing him hard. "Mom and Dad wouldn't even care. Mom said just last week that Carter makes too much money anyway, and that it's unfair I have to struggle while she gets a mansion." My mother knew. She knew they were together. She knew they were bleeding me dry, and she rationalized it because in her eyes, my money was just family money, meant to subsidize her golden child. I sat in that dark tent for what felt like hours. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The naive, loving girl who wanted a white picket fence died right there in the desert dirt. In her place, a military tactician woke up. They thought I was thousands of miles away, blind and helpless. They thought they could forge my name, steal my sanctuary, and leave me with nothing but ashes. They thought because I was family, I would just swallow the loss. They forgot one crucial detail. I pilot an attack helicopter. I don't surrender. I return fire. I closed the laptop. The blue light faded, leaving me in total darkness. I didn't call them to scream. I didn't warn them. Instead, I picked up my secure military phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd need. JAG, Office Captain Miller speaking. Captain Miller, I said, my voice as cold as ice. My name is Officer Carter. I need to report a multi-count federal wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy involving my estate. And I need a forensic accountant. It was time to burn it all down. There is a saying in the military: never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. The next morning, Mark called me on the satellite phone. He sounded exactly the same, loving, devoted. He told me he was going to buy paint for the master bedroom. I listened to his voice perfectly steady while I stared at the video file on my computer, the one where he and my sister plotted to steal my life. I miss you too, babe, I forced myself to say, making my voice sound exhausted and utterly naive. I love you. Take care of the house for me. Always, my love, he replied. I hung up, walked into the JAG office on base, and sat down with Captain Miller. I placed my laptop on his desk along with a stack of bank statements and the original, legally binding power of attorney I had drafted before deploying. Over the next few weeks, that cramped office became my war room. We built an evidence board. Picture a classic detective's corkboard in the dark, illuminated by a single desk lamp. Red strings connecting printed photos of Mark and Chloe. From the hidden camera, highlighted bank statements showing the fraudulent spending, and copies of the deed to my house. Every time I looked at that board, I didn't see my family anymore. I saw targets. Captain Miller was a bulldog in a uniform. He reviewed the footage and the bank logs. This is a slam dunk for wire fraud and identity theft, Officer Carter Miller said, adjusting his glasses. We could freeze the joint account and call the civilian police right now. They'd arrest him by dinner. No, I said flatly. Arresting him now only sends him to jail. He gets a public defender, my sister plays the victim, and my parents bail them both out. They'll just spin the narrative back home that I'm the cruel, controlling officer who overreacted. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the desk. I don't just want him in handcuffs. I want them both financially ruined. I want them drowning in debt. And I want them completely blindsided. Captain Miller smiled a slow, dangerous smile. Then we let them think their plan is working. But we control the battlefield. The first thing we did was secure my assets. I quietly transferred my direct military pay to a brand new, highly secure account. However, I didn't close the joint account Mark was draining. Instead, I left exactly $15 in it. Let him try to buy his next 5-star dinner with that. But the real masterpiece was the trap we set for the house. Mark's plan was to forge a new power of attorney, forge my initials allowing the sale of real estate, and use his sleazy realtor buddy to sell my home out from under me for quick cash. If I blocked the sale now, they would know I was onto them. So Captain Miller and I reached out to a civilian corporate lawyer stateside. Using my funds, I legally established an anonymous LLCA shell company based in Delaware. Let's call it Hearth Properties LLC. Legally, the owner of the LLC was hidden behind layers of corporate privacy, but practically, I owned it 100%. Then I waited. 3 weeks later, the trap was sprung. Mark, using the forged POA, officially listed my house on the market. His realtor friend priced it at $650,000 for a fast, all-cash closing. They wanted to dump it quickly before I came home. Within 24 hours of the listing going live, Hearth Properties LLC swooped in and made an all-cash offer for the full asking price. Mark and Chloe were ecstatic. On the hidden camera, I watched them pop a $200 bottle of champagne in my living room, celebrating their brilliant scam. They were about to be rich. Mark signed the digital paperwork immediately. Here is where the legal magic happened, because they were selling it to my LLC. My corporate lawyer stateside handled the closing. Mark thought the $650,000 was going to be wired directly into the joint account he controlled. But according to real estate law, proceeds from a home sale must go to the legal owner on the deed. The forged POA allowed Mark to execute the sale, but it did not change who legally owned the property. The title company, directed by my lawyers, legally wired the entire $650,000 straight into my secure, private, single-owner bank account. I effectively bought my own house from myself, protecting the title under an LLC, and captured the money before Mark could touch a single dime. But because Mark signed those papers and facilitated the transfer using a forged signature, he officially committed felony wire fraud across state lines. Mark didn't know the money wasn't coming. The title company told him the wire transfer would take 3 to 5 business days to clear. Thinking he was about to be a millionaire in a few days, Mark did exactly what stupid, greedy people do. He went on a spending spree on credit. Over the weekend, I watched my credit monitoring app light up. Mark had secretly opened 3 massive credit cards under his own name, banking on the house sale to pay them off. He bought 2 first-class, non-refundable tickets to Paris for him and Chloe. He put a $15,000 down payment on a diamond ring for her. He bought designer clothes. He racked up over $45,000 in personal debt in 48 hours. Monday morning came. The 48-hour window closed. The title transfer was finalized. Hearth Properties LLC legally owned the property. The money was safe in my private vault. By Tuesday, Mark would check his account and realize he had nothing. But I wasn't going to let him figure it out over the phone. I had accumulated over 90 days of combat leave. I cashed it all in. I didn't tell Mark. I didn't tell my parents. I packed my duffel bag, put on my Class A dress uniform, the olive green jacket, the ribbons, the aviator wings, and boarded a military flight back to the States. It was a Friday night. I knew exactly what was happening at my house. It was Chloe's 23rd birthday party. My mother and father were going to be there. Mark was going to be there. They were planning to celebrate their impending wealth, thinking I was still sweating in a desert across the globe. They were about to learn what happens when the truth finally comes home. It was 8:00 p.m. on a Friday. The house, my house, was lit up like a Christmas tree. Through the large front window, I could see them. It was a picture-perfect suburban scene. My mother was pouring wine, laughing with my father, and in the center of the living room, standing right in front of the stone fireplace, was Chloe. She was wearing a diamond necklace that Mark bought her with the credit cards he thought my house would pay for. Mark had his arm casually wrapped around her waist. They looked like the perfect happy family. A hearth built entirely on a foundation of my stolen money and their filthy lies. I didn't knock. I took out my original key, slid it into the deadbolt, and pushed the door open. I stepped into the foyer. I was in my full Class A Army dress uniform, olive green jacket, perfectly pressed, ribbons and aviator wings gleaming on my chest. A thick manila folder tucked under my left arm. The room froze. It was like I had walked into a photograph. My mother dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor. "Carter," she stammered, all the color draining from her face. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be deployed." Chloe took a step back, instinctively hiding behind Mark. Mark just stared at me, his perfect smile melting into an expression of sheer terror. "Happy birthday, Chloe," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through the room like a scalpel. Mark tried to recover. He stepped forward, forcing a nervous, trembling smile, his arms open for a hug. "Babe, oh my God, you're home early. We missed you so much. We were just—" "Stop!" I commanded. One word, a military order. He stopped dead in his tracks. I walked slowly to the kitchen island. Everyone's eyes locked onto me wide with panic. I tossed the thick manila folder onto the granite countertop. The slap of the paper echoed in the silent room. "Let's cut the act. I know everything," I said, maintaining direct eye contact with Mark. "I know about the Cabo trip. I know about you and my sister." My father's face turned bright red. He stepped forward, trying to salvage his golden child. "Now, wait just a minute, Carter. You can't just barge in here making wild accusations in that uniform. Where is your proof?" I didn't look at him. I simply pulled my phone from my pocket and synced it to the 75-inch smart TV on the wall. I pressed play. The TV flashed to life. It wasn't a picture. It was the high-definition video from the hidden thermostat camera. The video of Mark and Chloe on my sofa. Crystal clear audio filled the room. "We'll get more money," the recorded Chloe whined through the speakers. "She's an officer, right? Doesn't she have hazard pay? Just transfer it. I can lose the original POA, forge her initials, sell the house for $600,000 cash." Chloe screamed and covered her face, sobbing hysterically. My father's jaw dropped, suddenly realizing that the situation was far beyond a simple family dispute. My mother grabbed the counter, looking like she might pass out. I turned off the TV. The silence that followed was deafening. "Carter, please," Mark begged, his voice cracking, tears streaming down his face. "It was a mistake. We didn't mean it. We got caught up. I'll pay you back every cent. Just please don't cancel the house sale. If that money doesn't clear on Monday, I am financially ruined. I have $45,000 in credit card debt." I looked at him and let a slow, cold smile form on my lips. "Oh, Mark, the house sale went through perfectly. It closed yesterday." His eyes widened with desperate hope. It did. So the money is coming." "Yes," I nodded slowly. "The money went exactly where it legally belongs, to the legal owner on the deed." I opened the manila folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "You see, Mark, you didn't sell this house to a random buyer. You sold it to Hearth Properties LLC, a company based in Delaware, a company that I am the sole owner of." I watched his brain try to process the information. "I bought my own house from myself, Mark," I continued, my voice dripping with ice. "Using my own money. The title company legally transferred the $650,000 straight into my private account. You aren't getting a single dime." His knees buckled. He literally collapsed onto the floor, grabbing his hair. No. The tickets to Paris. The ring. I'm bankrupt. I'm completely bankrupt." "Worse than bankrupt, Mark," I corrected him. "Because when you signed those closing documents, you used a forged power of attorney. You committed federal wire fraud and real estate fraud across state lines. The buyer, my LLC, has already filed a formal complaint." Right on cue. The front door, which I had left ajar, swung wide open. 2 armed local police officers walked in, closely followed by a federal investigator in a windbreaker. "Mark Davies?" the federal agent asked, holding up a badge. Mark couldn't even speak. He just nodded, pale as a ghost. "Stand up and put your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for felony wire fraud and identity theft." The click of the handcuffs was the most beautiful sound I had heard in 14 months. Chloe was screaming, trying to grab him, but a deputy pushed her back. My mother finally snapped out of her shock. She rushed toward me, grabbing my uniform sleeve. "Carter, tell them to stop! You're destroying our family! He's going to prison! How could you do this to your sister? I looked down at my mother's hand, then looked directly into her eyes. The fire that had burned in me for 7 months finally iced over. This family destroyed itself the moment you decided my life was just collateral damage for Chloe's happiness, I said softly, stepping back so her hand fell away. I suggest you start packing her things. All of you have exactly 10 minutes to get off my property before I have the deputies arrest you for trespassing. My father tried to argue, but one look at the federal agent who was now glaring at him shut him up instantly. In 10 minutes, the house was empty. Mark was in the back of a squad car, facing 5 to 10 years in federal prison and crippling debt he would never pay off. Chloe, stripped of her rich boyfriend and her free ride, was dragged out by our humiliated parents, forced to move back into their cramped house, entirely dependent on them once again. I stood alone in the center of my living room. I took off my dress uniform jacket, draped it over the Italian leather sofa, and walked over to the fireplace. I picked up the framed photo of Mark and Chloe from the mantel. I tossed it into the hearth, struck a match, and watched the flames consume it. The glowing orange embers floated up the chimney, carrying away the last remnants of the lies. The house was quiet. It smelled like wood smoke and fresh air. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, sat down, and looked around. I had lost a fiancé and a family, but I had kept my honor, and most importantly, I had kept my home.